The laughter echoed across the courtroom like a slap. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough to cut through the air and slice straight into Adrian Velasco's chest. His wife sat 3 seats away from him, her arms folded with theatrical boredom. Beside her, her mother leaned in to whisper something cruel, and the man sitting closest to her, her lover, smirked openly as if this entire day were a private joke staged for their entertainment. Adrian stood alone at the defendant's table, sunlight pouring in through the tall courthouse windows, illuminating every crease in his worn suit. It was a bright Tuesday morning, the kind of day that usually smelled like fresh beginnings. But inside that courtroom, it felt like the end of everything. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet strength of people who endure more than they should, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, Kindness Journal. Your support keeps these stories alive. Adrian hadn't always looked like a defeated man. 5 years earlier, he had been the kind of husband neighbors admired. He woke before sunrise to prepare breakfast, packed his wife Marissa's lunch with little handwritten notes, and worked 12-hour shifts at a logistics warehouse to pay off the mortgage of the modest house they had bought together. He never complained when Marissa decided to quit her job to find herself. He never questioned the growing credit card bills or the expensive handbags that started appearing in their closet. He believed in patience. He believed in love. He believed that loyalty would be returned in time. What he didn't know was that while he was loading freight trucks under the scorching afternoon sun, Marissa was loading secrets into their home. It started subtly. She began spending more time at the gym. She changed her phone password. She laughed at messages she refused to show him. When Adrian asked gently if everything was okay between them, she accused him of being insecure. When he offered to go to counseling, she called him dramatic. And when he cried one night after finding a receipt for a weekend hotel stay he had never attended, she told him he was imagining things. The truth exploded one afternoon when Adrian came home early with flowers, hoping to surprise her. Instead, he surprised himself. He found Marissa in their living room with a man named Victor Hale, his hand resting comfortably on her waist, as if it had always belonged there. The look on her face wasn't guilt. It was irritation. As if Adrian had interrupted something far more important than his own marriage. That was the day the ground beneath him shifted permanently. The months that followed were brutal. Marissa moved out but continued using his bank account. Her mother, Clarissa Morrow, began calling Adrian directly, telling him he was lucky Marissa had tolerated him as long as she had. She accused him of being controlling, emotionally unstable, and financially incompetent. The accusations were absurd, but they were loud, and loud accusations have a way of sticking. When the divorce papers arrived, Adrian thought it would be a simple separation. He had done nothing wrong. There had been no violence, no infidelity on his side, no neglect. He assumed fairness would prevail. He was wrong again. Marissa filed claims of emotional distress. She demanded the house, half of his savings, and monthly alimony. She alleged that Adrian's emotional volatility had forced her to seek comfort elsewhere. Clarissa supported every claim with dramatic statements. Victor even submitted an affidavit describing Adrian as intimidating. Intimidating. Adrian, who cried during dog commercials. The legal fees drained his savings faster than he could rebuild them. He sold his car and began taking the bus to work. He stopped eating lunch to save money. His friends tried to comfort him, but slowly, one by one, they drifted away, uncomfortable with the drama. By the time the final court hearing arrived, Adrian was financially exhausted and emotionally hollow. And now, as he stood under the bright daylight pouring through the courthouse windows, he could feel their eyes on him. Marissa's red dress was carefully chosen, elegant and bold. Victor's tailored suit screamed confidence. Clarissa wore pearls, her chin lifted in superiority. When Adrian accidentally dropped a folder of documents, Victor chuckled softly. Marissa leaned over to whisper something to her mother, and both women smiled in unison. They thought he had already lost. The judge assigned to the case was Honorable Eleanor Whitaker, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled into a precise bun. She had presided over hundreds of divorce cases, seen every version of betrayal and greed. She adjusted her glasses and began reviewing the final submissions. Adrian tried to steady his breathing. His attorney, a young public defender named Soren Lee, had warned him that the odds weren't in his favor. Marissa's legal team was aggressive. They painted a picture of Adrian as unstable and obsessive. They claimed Marissa had endured years of emotional suffocation. Soren had done what he could with limited resources. But Adrian had already prepared himself for humiliation. As Marissa's lawyer delivered his closing remarks, he described Adrian as a man unable to accept that his wife had outgrown him. He implied that Marissa deserved financial support after sacrificing her prime earning years. Clarissa nodded approvingly. Victor crossed his legs confidently. Then it was Soren's turn. He didn't speak dramatically. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he calmly submitted a stack of financial records, phone logs, and one particular document that had arrived only days before the hearing. A forensic accounting report. Adrian hadn't known about it until Soren called him late at night with cautious excitement. While reviewing bank statements, Soren discovered large transfers from Adrian's account into an unfamiliar joint account, an account opened in Marissa's name with Victor Hales 6 months before she officially separated from Adrian. The transfers weren't small. They were systematic. Thousands of dollars moved monthly, labeled vaguely as household expenses. The courtroom grew quiet as Judge Whitaker flipped through the report. Clarissa's confident posture began to stiffen. Victor's smirk faded. Judge Whitaker asked a few measured questions about the dates of the transfers. She requested clarification on the timeline of the alleged emotional distress. She compared those claims to the dates Marissa and Victor had signed a lease together, 3 months before the divorce filing. The silence that followed felt heavier than any laughter earlier that morning. Then the judge spoke. Her voice was steady, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. She stated that the evidence indicated financial misconduct. She pointed out inconsistencies in Marissa's testimony. She noted that the claim of emotional abuse lacked substantiation, while the financial records clearly demonstrated deception. She said something that Adrian would remember for the rest of his life. She said that marriage is built on trust, and when one partner manipulates shared finances to fund an affair, the court does not reward that behavior. Marissa's face drained of color. Victor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Clarissa's pearls trembled against her collarbone as she whispered frantically to her daughter. Judge Whitaker ruled that Adrian would retain full ownership of the house. She denied alimony. She ordered Marissa to repay a significant portion of the misappropriated funds. Additionally, she mandated that Victor be investigated for potential involvement in financial fraud. The gavel came down with a final, echoing crack. And just like that, the laughter was gone. Adrian didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply closed his eyes and inhaled deeply, as if breathing for the first time in years. Outside the courthouse, the midday sun felt warmer than before. The sky was impossibly blue. Marissa stormed past him without a word. Victor avoided eye contact. Clarissa muttered something bitter under her breath. But none of it mattered anymore. Adrian stood still on the courthouse steps, feeling something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Relief. Not because he had won a house. Not because he had avoided alimony. But because the truth had finally been spoken aloud by someone who mattered. The following months were not magically easy. The house felt empty. The silence at dinner was loud. Adrian had to rebuild his savings from scratch. But something inside him had changed. He no longer felt small. He started attending therapy, not because a court demanded it, but because he wanted to understand why he had tolerated disrespect for so long. He reconnected with old friends. He volunteered on weekends at a community food pantry, remembering how close he had come to financial ruin. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Adrian ran into Judge Whitaker at a local cafe. She didn't recognize him at first. But when he thanked her quietly for looking beyond the noise and seeing the truth, she smiled warmly. She told him that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, but firmly enough to change a life. Adrian walked out of that cafe feeling taller. He eventually renovated the house himself, repainting the walls that once held painful memories. He turned the spare bedroom into a reading room filled with sunlight. He planted a small garden in the backyard, something Marissa had always said was a waste of time. It bloomed beautifully. And on a bright spring morning 2 years after the court ruling, Adrian stood in that garden sipping coffee, realizing something extraordinary. He had survived humiliation. He had survived betrayal. And he had not allowed bitterness to poison him. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that quiet resilience deserves to be celebrated, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps stories like Adrian's reach someone who might be standing alone in their own courtroom of life. And before we end, I have one special request. Comment the word justice if you believe that truth always finds its voice, no matter how long it takes. Adrian once thought that strength meant enduring in silence. Now he understood that strength meant standing still when others tried to push you down, trusting that integrity would outlast mockery. Because sometimes, the people who laugh the loudest in the daylight forget one simple truth. When the judge speaks, the truth echoes longer than their laughter ever could. And on that bright morning, under a sky that promised new beginnings, Adrian Velasco finally felt free.